all of posterity. That's why we have note takers who are usually in these meetings, Stephanie.
I mean, the whole thing is stunning when you think about the pomp, circumstance, and the show that's going on here. President Trump loves and is extraordinarily successful at creating these big media moments. But at what point are we going to say, what are they resulting in? Remember Singapore. How many weeks ago was that at this point? 4? And at the time, President Trump took all of that and the ratings and the attention as a massive win. And now here we are several weeks later, Kim Jong-un snubs Mike Pompeo, and it doesn't seem that President Trump's, denuclearization, no big deal, that's all over and done with. It's absolutely not. And North Korea continues to be a place of vulnerability at a risk for the president, where he looks more embarrassing today than he did a few weeks ago. What could the president have discussed in the last 2 hours with Vladimir Putin, who's been preparing for a meeting like that his whole career? What could President Trump have done in that meeting that he's now going to present to us that gives America a leg up that we didn't have hours ago?
Kelly O'Donnell, 6th row center in a room where Kelly, we've been told, feels a little bit closer to arrival.
There's something happening here, Brian. There's a gentleman here who just said he's from the nation. Security has come in and asked him to leave the room. I asked, is a journalist being removed? The reporter said he believes that he is. The security said that he would be invited back in. Obviously, we want to watch this. When the underpinnings of so much of the dialogue about this whole summit has to do with the treatment of journalists, the freedom of the press, someone who is wearing credentials and had been through the screening process that we all went through to get here is now being taken out of the room. That is not the United States Secret Service. They must be part of the Putin-Russian Federation delegation. I don't have an explanation for this, but in real time, we may be watching the kind of clampdown on press freedom that is at issue in the Russian Federation, and something that certainly U.S. journalists and the American people want to remind President Trump about the importance of our ability to stand here and ask whatever questions are necessary and to witness these events in an independent way. And so this is unfolding right in front of us. I don't know what it means. Again, he said he was from the nation. I'm sorry, I don't know him to give you more identification. But what happened?
He was heckling their live show.
Okay. All right. This is real-time assessment here. There is some description of perhaps he was heckling. I did not witness any of that. He appears to be a credentialed journalist who's been taken out of the room. Perhaps that is part of the delay. We also understand that the president had agreed to do some interviews, and his schedule had indicated that when this press event is over, he would be heading back to the United States. So perhaps some of the delay could be the president doing interviews. We don't know that, except to put inference, knowing that there were journalists who had scheduled and talked about their access to the president, and this would certainly be a beautiful venue to do it, the presidential palace in Finland. So we're watching this and assessing this as it's happening, Brian, and it certainly creates a different dynamic in the room. The room is packed. It is hot. It is filled with journalists. We all have many questions, and there are many important issues to discuss. But right now, there's an issue of freedom of the press that's unfolding in front of us. Brian?
All right, so there is the possibility of the president doing press interviews after the meeting with Putin, but before he has shared the outcome with the wider press corps.
We know that he is scheduled to do interviews, and we also know that he was leaving right after this. So a window of time needs to be found somewhere. So that could be one thing to account for the... Okay. I'm going to watch this.
Here he comes back again.
The gentleman is saying that...
All right, we lost Kelly O'Donnell's audio, but there is the gentleman walking back in, the journalist who was identified as being with the nation, taking his, maybe he's just coming in for his belongings, we don't know.
Brian, what if what we're witnessing is journalists being cherry-picked and asked to leave the room?
He's holding up a sign, or trying to. And it looks like Kelly is right we just can't hear her audio. She doesn't know that, and she's live narrating this scene.
Oh my goodness.
When we reestablished communication with Kelly O'Donnell, she had a really clear view of all of that, and more importantly, what was on the handwritten sign that he was holding up. But that man, we don't have an identification beyond what Kelly heard, that he was a credentialed member of the press corps and affiliated with the Nation magazine. Little pre-event excitement.
Certainly a rare thing to see at one of these events. They're so staid. The journalists who are present are all kind of vetted and credentialed very carefully. Half of them or such are from the traveling press corps at the president. So to see somebody either be kicked out or turn heckler, and we're not sure which one it is a very rare and unusual thing to see in one of these events.
And we don't know, we don't know details about this individual, but we know that we are coming off a time when the president has called the free press an enemy of the people. So it's really stunning to watch all this go down.
We saw Kelly O'Donnell. Still no comms with Kelly? Okay. David Ignatius of the Washington Post continues to watch with us. David, I'd love to get you on the record on the last conversation we had here. The relative size and strength of the Russian economy, especially when compared to the United States, and just matters of stature and balance, and whether the U.S. in holding any of this event is punching down.
I think that's really an important point. The Russians, and especially Vladimir Putin, have a real chip on their shoulder about having lost what they thought of as superpower status. The reality is that the Russian economy simply hasn't modernized in the way that so many people expected. It's still largely a one commodity export economy. It produces oil and gas, sells them, and that's the principal source of income. They aspire to have a modern IT sector. They certainly have a lot of smart mathematicians, computer scientists, but they never really have crossed that threshold. So we do have to remember, as loud as Putin talks on the world stage, as seriously as he's taken, this is not a first-order competitor. When people think about a rising China, that's a competitor that is able really to contest the United States in terms of economic power. It's a world cloud. Russia isn't that country. It's a country able to make trouble for the United States, but not really project power in any profound way.
While you've been talking, David, we've just seen the delegations walk in. Stephen Miller, the president's point person on immigration, former aide to Jeff Sessions, is on this trip. Bill Shine, former day-to-day head of Fox News, who's the new messaging guru at the White House, is on this trip. We saw Sergei Lavrov enjoying a laugh on the way into the room.
It was recently a Fox News White House reporter who took to Fox News Air to defend both NBC News, Kristen Welker, and CNN when the president went on one of his typical fake news. So you're seeing more and more defense across the media landscape of those saying, let's represent and defend what the free press is, whether it's Shep Smith or our colleagues sort of across the board, but also to David's point again about Russia. Here they are.
Спасибо большое. Thank you so much. Shall we start working, I guess? Distinguished Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, negotiations with the
President of the United States, Donald Trump, took place in a frank and businesslike atmosphere, I think we can call it a success and a very fruitful round of negotiations. We carefully analyzed the current status, the present and the future of the Russia-United States relationship, key issues of the global agenda. It's quite clear to everyone that the bilateral relationship are going through a complicated stage, and yet those impediments, the current tension, the tense atmosphere, essentially have no solid reason behind it. The Cold War is a thing of past. The era of acute ideological confrontation of the two countries is a thing of a remote past, is a vestige of the past. The situation in the world changed dramatically. Today, both Russia and the United States face a whole new set of challenges. Those include a dangerous maladjustment of mechanisms for maintaining international security and stability, regional crises, the creeping threats of terrorism and transnational crime. It's the snowballing problems in the economy, environmental risks, and other sets of challenges. We can only cope with these challenges if we join the ranks and work together. Hopefully, we will reach this understanding with our American partners. Today's negotiations reflected our joint wish with President Trump to redress this negative situation in the bilateral relationship, outline the first steps for improving this relationship to restore the acceptable level of trust and going back to the previous level of interaction on all mutual interests issues. As major nuclear powers, we bear special responsibility for maintaining international security. I deem it vital, and we mentioned this during the negotiations, it's crucial that we fine-tune the dialogue on strategic stability and global security and non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We submitted our American colleagues a note with a number of specific suggestions. We believe it necessary to work together further on to interact on the disarmament agenda, military and technical cooperation. This includes the extension of the Strategic Offensive Arms Limitation Treaty. It's the dangerous situation with the global American anti-missile defense system. It's the implementation issues with the INF Treaty. And of course, the agenda of non-placement of weapons in space. We favor the continued cooperation in counterterrorism and maintaining cybersecurity. And I'd like to point out specifically that our special services are cooperating quite successfully together. The most recent example is their operational cooperation within the recently concluded World Football Cup. In general, the contacts among the special services should be put to a system-wide basis, should be brought to a systemic framework. I reminded President Trump about the suggestion to re-establish the working group on anti-terrorism. We also mentioned a plethora of regional crises. It's not always that our postures dovetail exactly, and yet the overlapping and mutual interests abound. We have to look for points of contact and interact closer and a variety of international fora. Clearly, we mentioned the regional crisis, for instance, Syria. As far as Syria is concerned, the task of establishing peace and reconciliation in this country could be the first showcase example of the successful joint work. Russia and the United States apparently can act proactively and take assumed leadership in this issue and organize the interaction to overcome humanitarian crisis and help Syrian refugees to go back to their homes. In order to accomplish this level of successful cooperation in Syria, we have all the required components. Let me remind you that both Russian and American military have acquired a useful experience of coordination of their action, established the operational channels of communication, which permitted to avoid dangerous incidents and unintentional collisions in the air and in the ground. Also, crushing terrorists in the southwest of Syria, this south of Syria, should be brought to the full compliance